Hello and welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. We have with us today the Managing Director of HINDALCO Industries Limited, the flagship company of the Aditya Birla Group, with sales in excess of $16 billion. Today, in his capacity as the Vice President of the Aluminium Association, he will share with us what India needs to urgently do to achieve the mission of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which means a self-reliant India in the aluminium sector. Of course, the challenges are plenty, but this time the government and the Prime Minister, as he said, seems determined to make India self-reliant in across sectors, be it defense, be it aluminium, be it steel. It encompasses everything. And my guest today, Mr. Satish Pai, is at the center of all of this as far as the aluminium sector is concerned in India. I would like to welcome him on Policy and Politics today.
Yeah, hi Tarun. Thank you and happy to be here.
So we are talking almost after a year's time now. I would want to know from you what has transpired in this whole year, say from March, April of 2019 to August of 2020. What has changed for the aluminium sector?
I think if you take from last year, the aluminium sector was going through quite a positive phase because electric vehicles were coming in, the uses of aluminium in various sources was going up. And then if you remember, Q3 of last year to Q4 of this year, the Indian economy had started to slow down. If you look at the GDP growth of India last year, it was about 4.2%. And then from the middle of March, COVID hit us. So I think that, the Indian economy that was already slowing has now got a double blow of the COVID. And I think that, what we are hoping for, and actually we are starting to see the green shoots from June and July onwards, that from this slump, the Indian economy will start to pick up due to the various initiatives that are being taken by the government. And we will start to see the economy growing again and the demand for metals picking up.
That seems like some good news, but I want to know from you, the last time we spoke, you said that you are worried because aluminium imports in India have crossed 52% of the total consumption in India. Have we fared better since then, or does the government need to do something on it? Do you have any expectations here?
So the numbers show that as far as imports go, we have not done any better. 58% of India's nearly 3.7 million tons of consumption last year has come from imports. But on the other hand, it's also fair to say that because of the Prime Minister's initiative now, the government is very actively involved with us to see how we can reduce the amount of aluminium that's being imported. So various measures are being taken from the government to reduce imports, try to get domestic manufacturing to pick up. And I think that I'm quite hopeful this time because of the seriousness by which this government is looking at Atmanirbhar, that we will cut down the amount of imports coming into the country.
So, I would want to know from you that this has been a historical issue here, that a lot of scrap comes in as aluminium imports in India, and that has been worry that India has been importing a lot of scrap.
So you're absolutely correct. So of the nearly 2.1 million tons of aluminium that were imported last year, 1.35 million tons of it was scrap. So the interesting thing is that the aluminium consumption in India went down 7%, but the amount of scrap that was imported was flat year on year. So what it means is, as a percentage, the amount of scrap coming into India has actually gone up. And it's very unfortunate because I think that, we produce enough aluminium that the country needs. But because of pure financial arbitrage, a lot of scrap is coming into the country. And frankly, as we discussed the last time, going into utensils, going into the electrical sector where pure aluminium should be used. So I just wanted to tell you that the government is taking an initiative much like what they got from steel, which is to set up an import monitoring cell in the Commerce Ministry. And the whole idea of this import monitoring is that every importer into the country will have to give the amount coming in and for what purpose, meaning end use. We think that if this import monitoring cell comes in, then some of these scrap imports that are coming in and going into the wrong usage actually will get curtailed.
Yes, because it was indeed worrying that when we found out that Zorba, a kind of scrap which can be causing cancer or is a carcinogen, has found its way into utensils in India because we import scrap, which is indeed something we should all be worried about. I want to know from you a frank opinion. See, as far as the steel sector is concerned, we have imposed anti-dumping duties or safeguard duties and protected the steel sector. What sort of support have you got from the government, or under the Atmanirbhar Bharat plan would you expect from the government?
So if I say, the first thing is that the Minister of Mines and now with the Minister of Commerce, the import monitoring cell, which was a huge success for the steel industry, is being implemented for the aluminium industry. So that's number one. I think number two, we have put anti-dumping duties on foil coming from China and the ASEAN countries. Number three, the CVD and ADD investigations into wire rod coming from Malaysia, as well as value-added products coming from China, has been initiated. So I think that in the last 3 months, we have seen a renewed sense of urgency and quite a lot of practical steps, as you say, that were taken for steel are starting to be taken for aluminium as
well. Going forward, I want to know that as far as the cost of power is concerned, it has been an issue. Could you highlight a few points where the industry needs urgent support on the power cost or other issues related to power?
Tarun, the one important thing which the government has done, and I would like to place on record on behalf of the aluminium industry, the great job done by the Coal Ministry and Coal India Limited. In this COVID times, they have worked on making enough coal available to the aluminium sector. They have reduced the premiums charged to us. The captive power had a premium on the coal that we buy from auctions over the IPPs. During this COVID times, they have reduced that premium. So as a result, availability of coal and the pricing of coal during this COVID times, the aluminium industry has had a lot of support from the government. And as a result, the cost of power and hence the cost of production in aluminium during this Q1, the whole COVID quarter, was probably one of the lowest that we have seen in many years. So a great support from the Coal Ministry and Coal India, I have to put on record.
That's some good news that the Coal Ministry and Coal India has supported the aluminium industry. One thing which I would want to know is that the usage of aluminium is very low in India. It's as low as about 3 kilos. So per capita, I would want to know, can the usage of aluminium in the railways provide an impetus to the growth of aluminium sector in India? Being lightweight, it can be used for rolling stock, or is it already used?
So Tarun, very good point. I don't know, just 2 days ago in the newspaper, it was announced that the first aluminium coaches are for the metro in Pune are starting to be rolled out. So I think what you will find going forward is all the metros coming up, the underground metros that are being put into many major cities. All of that rolling stock is going to be made from aluminium. And that is certainly going to increase the usage of aluminium. I also wanted to tell you that we are working with the railways on freight. So the freight trains that are moving around carrying coal and other things, we are also working with the government to make aluminium wagons, because then those wagons can carry 15% more because they are lighter by that amount. And for the same weight, they can carry 15% more. So I think overall in the railways, the usage of aluminium, I think you're going to see it sharply going up. It's going to be led largely by the metro projects that are happening in the various big cities we have in the country.
So basically you see the usage of aluminium going up because of the usage of aluminium in the rakes as well as for the passenger trains. That is in a sense good news. I want to know more on the specific support you need from the government, which are financial incentives or the cost of capital, because I guess the cost of capital has been a worry.
Very true. Though, Tarun, it's fair to say that at the current time, interest rates in India are probably one of the lowest we have seen. So actually the issue becomes not just of the cost of capital, but if you have to invest more in the country today, then I think the important things we need to do if you want to start a greenfield project, then our biggest issues are still related to acquisition of land, getting the requisite clearances. And I think that if these, the government can help us, and I know that they have put in a task force to look at this, but if you can get land, water, and the infrastructure to set up industry to be speeded up, this would immensely help. I think that from a cost of capital, the current interest rates are low. So if this can continue, this environment continues, then the cost of capital certainly will be quite competitive for us. And I think the third thing that is important for the country is the overall economic growth. I think the government is taking many measures, but I think the economy has to start growing at the 7, 8, 9%. And that is very important for the industry to do further investments.
Okay, as far as the cost of custom duty, the issue of custom duty is there, what do you see should happen? Should there be a deterrent customs duty on aluminium imports so that this dumping should stop?
I think as far as custom duty goes, Tarun, we have discussed this even a year ago. I think that we have a 7.5% duty on aluminium, and we are asking the government to raise it to 10. And on the value added side, we think it should be raised to 15. And I think most Western countries, and if you even look at the US is going to put a 33% CVD duty on Indian aluminium products. So I think the timing is right, because otherwise large amounts of imports are going to come in from China and the ASEAN countries. So we are certainly asking the government, and this has been a long-standing request from the Aluminium Association, that custom duties on aluminium and aluminium value-added products should be increased to slow down the imports coming into the country.
That's a fair demand in a sense. And do you think that a minimum import price, as they call, should be levied for aluminium? Because until the plant load factor of Indian companies at least goes up to 70%.
So, as you know, Tarun, that the minimum import price, which was put in place for the steel industry, certainly helped the steel industry. And I think that our request has been the same, that we should have a minimum import price for the aluminium bought into the country, because India has its own structure of costs, of duties, of renewable power obligation, of cess on coal, and which the other countries don't have. So these should be taken into account to establish a minimum import price of aluminium into the country.
So you brought up a good issue of cess on coal. I want to know from you, as far as the cess on coal is concerned, should the government relook at this issue, because it is 400 per ton is pretty expensive and adds to the cost of production to a great extent?
So I think that this coal cess, various industry bodies have been representing to the government that it certainly makes the price of coal and hence the price of power in India much higher than many of the countries we compete with. I think that we have made the representations, Tarun, and I would certainly hope that the government takes a hard look at this cess, because it does raise the cost of power. I mean, in India, if you notice, we have the coal cess, we have renewable power obligations, which I have to tell you another positive is that the government has capped the RPO for the existing power plants to the date at which they were commissioned. So that relief we have got, but still up to 7.5% of renewable power obligations are there. And many states impose an electricity duty. So all these add to the cost of power for industry in India, which is one of the highest in the world.
So, all over the world we see that domestic production is prioritized. Could you share with us that under the Make in India scheme, which sectors can we prioritize that the government should ask that aluminium should be procured for these industries or at least government projects? Railways is just one case which we discussed.
So, Tarun, I am now a part of a very strong initiative put out by DPIIT and the Ministry of Commerce under the guidance of Mr. Piyush Goyal. And they have taken what they call champion industries, and aluminium is one of them. And they are working with us to see how they can prioritize different aluminium products, which sectors. So we have taken building and construction, defense, and packaging. And with the government, they are working with us to say, what can we do so that domestic aluminium is used in these sectors? And they're trying to work with us to find out all the different problems that we have and try to address them one by one. So I think that in the last 3 months, the intensity and the focus that this government has put on trying to reduce imports and increase manufacturing in India. I think this increasing manufacturing in India is vital to the future development of the country. I think this initiative from the Ministry of Commerce is very good.
So, that is one welcome initiative by the Ministry of Commerce, which is a good news indeed. Moving forward, I would want to know from you something on the investments that have gone into the aluminium sector, because the government always says that domestic industry must increase or ramp up investments. Could you share the industry-wise investment data with us?
So, Tarun, I think that, in the last year since we talked, the alumina side, which is very upstream, both NALCO and HINDALCO announced and are in the process of increasing the alumina capacity. So, HINDALCO invested in a 500,000 ton expansion of alumina, and I think NALCO also did a 1 million ton expansion of their Damanjodi refinery. I think that on the downstream side, the value-added side, HINDALCO has committed nearly 6,000 to 7,000 crores over the next 3 to 5 years to expand downstream capacity. I think the problem has been on the upstream side on the aluminium smelting. Until the price of power comes down, it does not make sense to increase the smelting capacity in India. And we have pointed this out to the government because India in the next 5 years will need another 3 million tons of aluminium. We have so much coal, we have the best quality of bauxite. And India should not become a huge importer of primary aluminium. I think that would certainly be a very big waste and a big negative to the Indian economy. India should be actually an aluminium superpower and be exporting aluminium with the bauxite reserves that we have. So I think from an investment point of view, that's very important. The price of power needs to be resolved.
India continues and is the second largest, though a distant second largest aluminium producer in the world. I would want to know from you, you brought a very important point up on the power sector. Is there any special policy that the aluminium sector needs as far as power sector is concerned or the availability of power is concerned, or prioritizing power at a certain affordable cost to make production in a sense competitive globally?
Absolutely. I think that, Tarun, if you remember, 40% of the price of aluminium, of a ton of aluminium, is power. So to make aluminium industry in India competitive internationally, the price of power needs to be competitive. And who do we compete with? We compete with China, we compete with Norway, we compete with Canada, we compete with Russia. All of these people, the price of power is cheaper than the price of power for aluminium producers in India. So this data we have shown the government, and we said that if we want India to become an aluminium superpower, which we have the potential to be, and we have the bauxite reserves to do it, the price of power in India over a period of time, which is the investment period is 20 to 25 years, needs to come down at least by 25 to 30% from where it is today.
So, now as far as the quantitative restrictions on aluminium imports are concerned, that we speak about a minimum import price, the second is quantitative. What kind of quantitative restrictions do you expect to
So you were talking about quantitative restrictions. So what I was explaining is that in the absence of higher import duties on the imports coming in from ASEAN countries, or any other means to cut down the amount of imports, quantitative restrictions is one of the mechanisms. And quantitative restrictions looks at the volume of imports over the last 3 years and tries to cap the imports in each chapter at a certain level, so that there is no sudden spurt or increase in imports that happen. So what we have done is given to the Commerce Ministry every 7601 down to all the 8-digit codes of the 76 chapter of aluminium, looked at the data over the last 3 years and given the volumes that should be allowed coming into India. And that is what we call quantitative restrictions. And that proposal has been made by the Aluminium Association to the Commerce.
Do we have a lot of bauxite, as you said, but mining clearances are really an issue. How do you look at that?
So again, Tarun, if you have noticed, many of the initiatives that have been taken up by the Ministry of Mines during this last few months during COVID, I am actually quite hopeful now that many of these issues related to getting clearances, the speed at which we get clearances, the number of mines that need to be auctioned, the making a single window where you put Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Environment and Forest, Ministry of Commerce all together, so many of these things can be speed tracked. All these are in the pipeline. Commercial auction of coal mines has been announced. So I think a number of these steps have been put on the table and are being executed. Frankly speaking, if these steps are executed, then I think that a lot of the issues that the industry faced in mining is going to be resolved.
Government is speaking in terms of the employability or employment intensive industries. Could you share with us the kind of people that the aluminium industry impacts in India? Direct employment, indirect employment and other data.
So the aluminium industry in India employs about 8.5 lakh workers. So the multiplying factor of aluminium is huge. It can be 3 to 5 times the primary employment that the aluminium producer does. So we have shown to the government that if the downstream part of the aluminium industry grows and the associated mining sector grows, the employability factor is huge. Currently, we employ 8.5 lakhs. And remember, Tarun, this employment will be generated in states like Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, MP and UP, which are not today enjoying a lot of the benefits of the growth that the country is seeing, because those are normally happening in the coastal states. So the aluminium industry can actually have a positive impact in the hinterland of the country.
Input costs have been a worry for the aluminium sector. Basically the cost of raw materials and the duty, import duty on them, like raw petroleum coke, caustic soda lye, these are importing components for your sector. Could you share what are your expectations? Because unless your import cost is low, you can't be globally competitive. India can't be an export powerhouse, which now the government wants.
Yeah, absolutely, Tarun, you are very correct. A lot of our representations to the government has been, for example, raw petroleum coke, calcined petroleum coke today is at 10 and a 7.5% duty. 10% actually means it's an inverted duty structure. So we have been asking the government to reduce the duties back where it was just a couple of years ago, which is 2.5%. So raw petroleum coke, calcined petroleum coke, we have asked for the duties to be reduced to 2.5%. You're absolutely right on caustic as well. I think that, the government is putting duties on caustic coming into India, which is increasing the price of caustic for us. So many of these input costs, which we have to import, furnace oil, many of these things, we are asking the government.
What about aluminium fluoride and coal tar pitch?
Exactly. When I talked about raw petroleum coke, coal tar pitch, all of these carbon products, we have asked the government to reduce the duty down to 2.5% because current duties are 7.5% to 10%, and these certainly make us uncompetitive.
Okay, as far as the electricity duty on the aluminium sector is concerned, for example, in Odisha, which is very high, do you think that there is some scope of lowering it, because that again adds to your input cost?
Absolutely. So, the electricity duty is a state subject. So, every state uses the electricity duty to raise revenue. So, this is one of the requests that we have made, that this electricity duty in many states is a big burden on the power cost. And I think that at least for sectors like aluminium, which provide employment, which you want to get new investment in, I think that this electricity duty should be reduced, because 40% of the cost for us is from the power. So when you put a high duty on it, it
40%.
certainly affects the cost of production for us.
I want to know from you, can India use standards as a barrier to, stop importing so much of scrap?
So, we have been working with the Ministry of Mines for nearly 2 years now, trying to develop a standard for scrap. And for various reasons, including the Scrap Association of India vehemently opposing it, for obvious reasons, I think. They don't want a standard to be put in place, because a standard means that they would have to follow very strict norms. Testing has to happen, that there are no impurities, no magnesium, lead, radioactive material in it. So there has been quite a lot of opposition, but we have been trying very hard to put in a standard for scrap, Tarun. I'm hoping that the import monitoring cell would at least be a first deterrent, because every importer would have to give the end user why the scrap.
So, if you had a message to give the Prime Minister on behalf of the aluminium sector, what message would that be, at what your sector can contribute for making this country Atmanirbhar, that is self-reliant in the aluminium sector, A, and how could you contribute to exports that will help us reduce India's fiscal deficit? If you can give a 2-minute message or some points that you would like to share.
So look, the first thing which I would like to point out is aluminium is the strategic metal of the future. So whether, as you said, it's railways, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's the defense sector, all of these are big users of aluminium. So going forward for India, aluminium is important. Point number one. Point number two, India has got adequate and good quality bauxite and coal reserves. So India can be an aluminium superpower in production for the domestic needs as well as exports. Now, to do that, what we need help is that we have to cut down the imports coming in from China and the ASEAN countries into India. The Indian aluminium domestic sector should be encouraged by being provided cheaper power, more bauxite mines being made available, input costs, duties being reduced so that we are competitive. And then fourth is that for India, aluminium will bring industrial development and employment in the hinterlands of the country, which is so very important. So I think all these 4 points put together, I think it makes a very compelling reason why the government should be putting aluminium as a key focus industry and helping the industry expand.
My final question to you today on policy and politics, should, in your view, aluminium industry get a core industry status, and should aluminium sector have a policy of its own, because you yourself said it's a metal of the future, and in India is in future destined to be a aluminium powerhouse with everything going right?
Absolutely, Tarun. I think, this has been one of our long-standing demands, that aluminium should be considered as a core sector. And I think the aluminium policy, I don't know if you have seen, Niti Aayog has already put out an India aluminium vision. And the Ministry of Mines is also finalizing an aluminium vision document. So I think that the importance of aluminium now has been recognized by most of the people in power in the government. I think that it's all going to be down to executing the actual steps that are needed so that we can grow the aluminium productions and stop the imports that are coming into the country, especially scrap imports.
Thank you so much for your time today. We got a whole bird's eye view onto the sector, employment of close to 1 million people that this industry supports. and the potential that you shared with us for this industry. In our next upcoming episodes of Policy and Politics, I would like to discuss the vision document for the aluminium sector with you, that is before the Ministry of Mines as also Niti Aayog, because I think that is something where we all look forward to in a sense, and the industry looks forward to. As for today, thank you so much for sparing your time and joining us for today's episode of Policy and Politics.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.